BioBalance Healthcast, Episode 89, Planning for End of Life.
BioBalance Healthcast features conversations about positive aging, covering treatment and solutions that include bioidentical hormone pellet therapy, safe and affordable skin rejuvenation, and spa-quality botanical skincare. Your hosts are Dr. Kathy Maupin, Medical Director of BioBalance Health and a leading expert in treating symptoms of aging, and Brett Newcomb, a licensed professional counselor.
We're talking about planning for the end, really, in terms of estate planning, in terms of conversations that you need to have, in terms of asking yourself questions about what do I want when I can no longer speak for myself, or even when I die, planning my own funeral. Who do I want? My dad called me 6 months before he died, and he said, I want 2 songs played at my funeral. I want you to find them, make copies of them, have them ready. And he told me what the songs were. So, I did that.
Said, huh?
I did that, and I took him, and he had it, who did he want to speak at his funeral? He had suggested some things to them about what they ought to say.
Of course he did.
But I hadn't encountered that directly before.
Yeah.
Somebody said, well, I want this music, and I don't
I have all my
it.
Bible verses marked in my Bible that
Do you
have
really?
a special tag on them.
Wow.
That are my funeral verses, my favorite verses.
Yeah. Well, I want the same song my dad used. Why me, Lord? Chris Christopherson. You have to listen to the song. But
Yeah.
It's a great message
Great
about,
title.
yeah. So we want to talk about all of those things.
How to make this easier than it can be, because I've done it wrong my parents didn't plan anything. They were like, oh, it'll all just happen. It's going to, and I'm like, oh, it's not going to happen. We need to know what to do. I'm an only child. I need to know what you want.
Well, it's like that bumper sticker, life happens. And it does happen, and you need to give some thought to it while you still can, because
but
if you
just
don't,
let it happen in this instance.
yeah,
You have to make
other
some
people
decisions.
will be making decisions for you. So let's talk about, first of all, the paperwork that's involved in appropriate planning. We recommend that you have a will, that you go to an attorney and you write a will, and you make copies of that, and you create a file that has your will, medical directives, a power of attorney for medical directives, a durable power of attorney for medical directives.
Decisions.
That you have in that file all of your insurance documents, your life insurance, your passwords, your bank account information.
Very important.
We recommend that you make a list. You have to make it with somebody, and you have to sign it.
Make a list of all your possessions.
Distributing all your crap.
Who you want them to
who
who you want them to go to, or if you want them just, everything else, send to charity.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
You know,
if that's what
if
you
you
choose,
want it to
and
go
a
to
charity of your
charity, you
choice.
can
I
do
want it
that.
all to go to this
Yes.
charity. What we found in our personal experience is it's very difficult to talk to elderly parents of our parents' generations about these things, because they really resist. They are in denial, especially as they physically deteriorate. Their personal sense of loss of control over their life. It's not my house anymore. They took my furniture away. They put me in this bed I don't like. I'm around these people. The decline of independence is a functioning reality for them that they resist in every way that they can.
And it will be for us too.
And one of the things that they can control is whether or not they participate in a conversation about, what do you want done with your china? They don't want to have that conversation.
Right, because that means then they're going to die.
Yeah.
They have to think about it, and that to them is a difficult decision, no matter whether they're Christians and think that there's a better life or not. They still don't want to die.
Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
Yeah. So that's a reality. And if you're a planner, if you're somebody who's kind of a compulsive kind of person, that drives you crazy, because you're going to plan for your children, but your parents aren't planning for you. So we're going to talk about how to have a nice, calm discussion with your parents. And Brett's going to tell us how to do this, because I've done it wrong every time.
You can't always do it. You can try, and you have to revisit it, and maybe you have to take it in incremental bites. You don't have one big, Dad, you're going to die. Let's talk about the life without you.
That's probably not a good...
In the way you start. But you start by talking about, if things happen that mean the end is near, what do you want? What do you want done with your car? If you still have a car, if they haven't been taken away from you. What do you want done
like...
with any assets that remain? What do you want done physically, medically? I mean, do you want to be on a respirator? Do you want a feeding tube? Do you want somebody?
That all has to be written down in the medical directive.
It absolutely does, but you got to get them to have the conversation
Right.
to get to the point where you can write down the answers. And then you said they have to have and sign a DNR.
They do when they need it.
When they get to that place.
When they get to that point, and if they're not able to sign the DNR because they are not with it enough, then the power of attorney, whoever that child is, and that needs to be decided ahead of time.
Right.
That the
child
or
or
the
friend or
spouse,
designated person,
yeah.
whoever it is, that you have to designate someone to speak for you. When
Right,
you
I'm on
can't
a couple
speak.
people's because I'm a physician, so on some
Right.
of my friends, so they feel like I would be a good person to decide whether they should be on or not.
And then they've had conversations with you
Yes.
about what do they want done.
Right, and it's all written down, and so we have it written down, but there are many vagaries that
Yes.
happen in between that they think if you're a medical person, which is probably true, you know what's going to lead to what. If you do
Right.
this, is it going to lead to something I don't want?
Right.
You know, so if
Right.
so many times it's not your spouse or your child, but you need to designate who that person is because you don't give them the power of attorney right now, of course, because you don't need it, but you give it to them when you need it. And if you are in a position where you're going downhill, your kids need to know who that person's going to be and needs to be present to sign it.
Well, it can be structured. I mean, if I give you a durable power of attorney, in the writing of it, I can structure the triggers that
Right.
would authorize it.
That's
So
right.
that until that point is reached, I'm in full command.
That's true, and I've been in a different situation where it's been more of an emergent thing.
Yeah, because with my wife's grandmother, when she lived with us towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
my wife had a durable power of attorney if she had a stroke, if she became
Mm-hmm.
unconscious, if. I mean, there was a whole litany of ifs
Mm-hmm.
that would then give her that authority. And one of the things that my wife found is that she had to keep and carry with her multiple copies of all that stuff.
Right.
Because even if we took grandma to the hospital because she fell and broke her hip or she had a
Mm-hmm.
stroke, and you go to the same hospital that you were at 3 months ago when she had the stroke and now she's broken her hip, they want new documents. Even though they're on file and in the records, you walk in there and say, well, this is what she wants done. They say, well, prove that you have the right to say that. So you have to have that So Phil's carried
That's
multiple
weird, 'cause I
copies of
wouldn't
that
think
around.
that.
Well,
I wouldn't think they'd do that.
it was a faster, quicker solution
Yeah,
for
than for
service
them looking
to have
for
it
it.
with you.
Yes, maybe medical records on the electronic
Yeah.
level will be better, but that's true. I mean, but you need to have it in your house, you need to have it with your attorney,
Right.
you need to have it in place, like if your house burns down, you don't want all your documents to be gone.
Right.
So you need to have a couple copies. I wouldn't keep everything on a computer because computers get stolen or go down or backup fails, and
No, you
I
need
would keep
tangible
copies. So those are the kind of the legal things. You need the will, the power of attorney, the advance directive, which is what they call the medical power of attorney.
When you said 2 powers of attorney, one for medical issues and then
Right,
one for financial. Okay.
Right. And if you go on the Bar Association website we're in Missouri, for the state of Missouri, and most states have them, they have the durable power of attorney form
Okay.
for medical care, not for financial.
Right.
Because that's a little more complicated.
Right.
So they have that, and you can print it off and talk about it, write in stuff, sign it, copy it yourself without going to a lawyer.
Okay.
And that's a service that the bar, my husband's an attorney, the bar provides.
So a list of personal possessions and the distribution of those isn't an integral part of a will or a power of attorney. That's
They
just a
don't have
personal
it.
conversation.
You can put it in that,
Okay.
but it's nice to have it written down. You can have it in the will, or you can have it as a separate document that everybody signs, but it's important for the kids to not fight over things
Right.
if you have more than one child.
If you can
don't really need it if you have
can do
one
that.
child or one heir.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to have to deal with everything anyway.
Okay.
But that's something. Then the other things are like your funeral. You should plan your funeral. You should plan what you want, have it written down, tell your kids where it is if they don't want to talk about it. I mean, you should have your funeral figured out, where your plot's going to be, even pay for it ahead of time. I mean, it's a terrible thing to have, and I went through this, to have a parent die and you look at the other parent and you go, so Dad, where's all the paperwork for the funeral? And he goes, I don't know.
Right.
We didn't think about it.
Right.
She was 93. Okay, so there's no excuse for not thinking about it.
Right. So then you ask the survivor, Dad, what do you want done with
and
Mom?
And he's crying and upset, and he can't.
We have to make a decision
do
now.
It.
Right.
And so that's under duress. So you can't make a good decision about a funeral, and that's where people get stuck for tons of money that they didn't want to spend.
Well, and other questions that come to mind, do you want to be cremated?
Right.
How do you feel about cremation? You were married before and have other family that have died in Minnesota. Where do you want to be married? You want to be married with this new family? Do you want to be married with the old family? Because if you don't make those decisions, then it's going to be a cat fight. I have some friends who someone died and was cremated, and they actually divided up the ashes in 3 or 4 containers and shipped them off to different parts of the country. That's the solution that they came to, because nobody would give. You know, I want Dad. No, I want Dad. Dad wants to be with me.
Well, you know, I have a friend whose father was an attorney, so he had everything finished. Yeah. Everything was perfect. It was just, they didn't have worry about it. They didn't fight about it. He provided money for the entire family to go on a cruise.
Yeah.
The year after he died. I mean, I want to die like this.
Yeah.
And then send his ashes over the Caribbean, because that's where he spent a lot of time on a sailboat. That was his rule.
Upwind. I was talking to a woman yesterday who said it was so disorienting for her. She spread her father's ashes where he told her he wanted them spread, and they all blew back on her. And it was horrible for her.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was.
We can laugh about it now, but it is. I know, but it's the symbolism
feeling.
of it. Yeah. So there's some realities there that you have to think about.
Yeah, but just I've now seen how to do it and how not to do it, you know. And so I would say, for the love of your children, the fact that you want them to love you when you're gone. You don't want them to be so angry that you didn't do anything or plan anything, that they're angry just because of that, and they don't remember you the same way.
Right.
So to decrease any of their pain or any of their anger, it would be nice to have that all planned out. So if you should write down in a list, like, which nursing home you want to go to, which assisted living you'd want to go to if you
care, and if you care.
And that has to be updated, obviously, when new things come out. You should write down which child is going to be
the primary
decision maker, or the primary financial or medical decision maker. You should decide which pastor you want to have do your, or rabbi do your funeral. I mean, that's an important choice, and not everyone has the obvious choice. I didn't know. I mean, my dad doesn't really remember what his favorite foods are.
Right.
So I'd want to know what favorite foods are, or treats that I can bring him, because I'm not really sure when I bring him things whether he really likes them or not, or if he's just being polite. So so all of these things are really important. How do you want the TV on? Do you want it off? Do you want to listen to classical music? Do you not? I mean, everything you could possibly think of if you were sick and at home should be written down, and that will relieve your children of any issues, and it will make your passing be so much better, because none of us live forever.
And it allows you at least the illusion of being in control for more of that process than you would be if you don't have these conversations and you don't think your way through, how do I want my exit to be? But so we're looking through one end of the telescope, and that's the sandwich generation that we represent, looking at the exit of our elderly parents.
And of ourselves.
Well, that's where we have to turn it around and look at the other end, because we have to look at our own exit, and we have to look at the impact of that on our children. What do we want them to have to deal with? How do we make this process? Because we are dealing with a generation of parents that this medicine didn't exist to extend their lives. These interventions didn't exist for most of their life.
My parents didn't think they were going to live to be 80, much less 90s.
No, and they lived that way. They smoked, they drank, they caroused.
That's right.
You know. So part of the conversation that we need to have is with our own children. But first we need to have it with ourselves and with our spouses. What do we want done? I mean, crazy as it is, if I had a conversation with my wife and my attorney, if I die, I have 2 sons from 2 marriages. What do we distribute to whom, when, and how? Does my older son have to wait until Phyllis dies? If Phyllis and I both die, what do each one of them get? You know, one's significantly younger, one's significantly older. you have to think about those things, because if you don't think about those things and you don't make those plans, the state of Missouri has a plan for you.
Yeah.
It's called probate court.
Yeah.
And there's a standard
And it's
distribution
expensive.
at law if you don't exercise your right.
Now in Missouri, and I'm not sure that this is true everywhere, but if one spouse dies, everything's in the is the property of the other spouse. It's not until both people die that the possessions are divided. But you can still, when you die, determine part of your legacy to go to one child or another, or one place or another, or your dog, or yeah, we kind of had that.
Who inherits the dog?
Yeah. Well, we've always inherited every dog.
Yeah.
We've had everybody's
You got a
dog.
menagerie at home.
Yeah. So, and who inherits? And do you want to give your money to the ASPCA? I mean, where do you want to give your money? I mean, some people don't want to give it to their kids. They don't think it'll be good for them.
Well, and churches talk about planned giving, because they want to come around and say, if you're not being here anymore, can we have some of your money? Do you believe in us and support us enough that you want our mission to continue
so do
beyond your
colleges
lifetime?
and universities.
Colleges and universities, leave a bequest. There's a lot of people lined up at the door to get your stuff. And again, if you don't think about it and you don't make plans for it, then you don't have control over where it goes.
And you never know if your child's going to be so upset they're going to do silly things under the duress or the grieving. So it's better just to have it all taken care of, and then there's not so much question or emotional issues.
Well, or you have 3 or 4 kids that'll argue over, we don't demonstrate that we love Dad enough unless we buy the $20,000 casket.
I know. Or no, he said he wanted to be buried. No, he said he wanted to be cremated. That's a discussion. You don't want your children
when somebody
fighting.
you love has just died, that's not the time for clear thinking. That's not the time for good decision making.
That's right.
It may be what you have to do, but if you plan ahead, it won't be what you have to do.
And if all of this is too upsetting, or you feel like it's too much for you to have to do, there are attorneys who are very good at planning all of this out and helping you make all these decisions for yourself.
And specialize in that.
And specialize in that. And they are, they're basically trust attorneys. Attorneys are not supposed to have specialties, but they do specialize in that. And then they can even be the people that, if you have no family, that can determine where your money goes, how you're taken care of. I mean, there are people who are taken care of basically by an attorney, and they manage your money and manage your care. So that can happen as well. But if this is just too much stuff, to have to do, then make a time frame. Make a time when it's going to be done, and make sure you work toward it. And if you can't do it yourself, then hire an attorney to help you do it. And I think that's the best way to solve this problem. Put it to bed. It's over. It's kind of like a good contract.
Well,
you put it in the drawer and it's gone.
At the end of the day, you can run, but you can't hide. Death comes to all of us. And if you make good plans when you're calm and rational, when you're not in crisis, when it's not an urgent situation, it is more likely to go the best way that it can go and the way that you want it to go. So what we have been talking about the last couple of podcasts is a reality that we are currently facing. And we want you to know that you're going to face it someday, and we hope that you make good plans and do it in the most satisfying way for yourself and for your family.
And we thank you for listening to us, and all those patients of mine who've been asking me to talk about this because they're all going through it. Then here it is.
Thank you for listening.
Email your questions or comments to podcast@biobalancehealth.com. You can find the BioBalance Healthcast on iTunes and on YouTube. For more information about bioidentical hormone pellet therapy and other reverse aging solutions, visit biobalancehealth.com or call 314-993-0963. Follow Dr. Maupin on Twitter @Dr. Kathy Maupin and on Facebook at facebook.com/biobalancehealth. Brett Newcomb can be found at brettnewcomb.com.